always someone to fill my cup. For those that I've done wrong, for those that I've known for oh so long, I'll always hold a place in my heart for you.
So, oh man. So Sarahjane, I do apologize. And for those who are listening in right now, I have to tell you the strangest thing just happened. Sarahjane was into her story and I forgot to press record. So there's a whole lot of this story that that's going to be repeated. And if you look at the look on Sarahjane's face, she's going to kill me. Which is, I totally deserve that. So with that being said, so you guys did catch a lot of this. Sarahjane is from the British Columbia, right?
Yeah.
And so she's on the outskirts up there. She specializes in yoga, and her experiences with grief has given her some tools to help other people deal with their grief and also find pretty much her purpose in what she's doing now. So with that being said, Sarah, thank you for being on the show today. And again, I do apologize. There's oh my God. So let's dive into it. Let's dive into it.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I live on Salt Spring Island, which is a small island off the west coast of British Columbia in Canada. And I'm looking out at the beautiful Salish Sea. And this is a really important place to me because it's been key in my journey with grief. And getting outside and being on the land has been huge, as well as my experience as a yoga teacher. I've been yoga teacher for give or take 10 years and practicing for quite a bit longer than that. And my husband and I, about 10 years ago, right when I was starting my teaching journey, were trying to get pregnant. And we did pretty quick, which was a very happy day. But soon after, so about 12 weeks after, discovered that I'd had a miscarriage. And then that was the beginning of about a 7 or 8 year journey with multiple miscarriages, unexplained infertility, and then chronic illness, which led to me having a hysterectomy in 2018. So it's been about 3 years since then. And that whole time I was teaching and practicing yoga, and so much was happening inside and around me, the depths of grief and all that was going on, and really felt like I was just kind of going through the motions. With my yoga practice, I was getting lots out of it in terms of physical fitness and flexibility and all of that kind of thing. But I just didn't really feel like me. And I mean, grief does that to all of us, right? And it's only since having the hysterectomy and having that be sort of like a line in the sand of like, well, having a baby is never going to happen for me. And so I was able to sort of let go of the hope of it. And even though it had been a long time, throughout that whole time, yes, I had thought, well, what if it doesn't happen for me? What if it doesn't happen for us? But I never truly let go of that because it felt sort of almost like a betrayal, right? Like a giving up of hope. But once I had the hysterectomy, that was like, okay, no, like this is not happening. And while it was very painful and at different times, because grief isn't, just get on with it. It's like a very all over messy kind of process. Still at times I have what I refer to as griefy days, Like but it's only since then that I realized that I had had this sort of disassociation, dislocation thing going on with my body. And that the process of that had led me to childlessness had sort of severed a connection and a trust that I had with my body, because my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, or what I saw other women's bodies around me doing. And I had no explanation for that. There was no reason for that. And plus, having so many tests and being in and out of the hospital, there's sort of to deal with that, there's a certain amount of disassociation that happens. And it's a natural response of the body, which is great that it happens in moments of stress and when we need it to. But when you're in prolonged states of that kind of disassociation and disconnection can stay sort of stuck on, beyond its point where it's serving us. And that I realized that I was at that place. And so having such a strong foundation in yoga, I started to intentionally make my practice about even just sort of remembering that I had a body. That's where it had to start, because it did really feel like I was experiencing the world from like the neck up kind of thing. And there's a great association, an organization in Vancouver, British Columbia, called Yoga Outreach. And they teach this style of yoga that they call trauma-informed yoga. And they have three basic sort of foundations. And one is that we practice to realize that we have a body. And the second one is to practice to befriend the body. And the third one is then using the body as a resource, like noticing what you feel and where you feel it. And through this practice, I've been able to reestablish that sense of, my body is sending me signals and that I can trust what it's telling me, and then have this connection to my body, and then therefore connection to other people and the world around me. Yeah.
Wow, that is that's actually fascinating. And this has been a week of talking about pregnancy loss, right? And the grief that comes along with it. And to hear how you got into it and make that connection, and listen to other people, it's like, wow, it's like right there, right? And most people just kind of miss it. That's disassociation, and coming from a man's perspective, when long time ago, before I had my first daughter, her mom miscarried, right? So listening to it from your perspective and then having to experience it from my end, it was totally different. Mm-hmm. It was totally different, because I never knew that's what she was going through. But also I was very, very young. I was around almost 17. Mm-hmm. So when that happened, what was it like between you and your husband at the time? Was there like a separation, or did you guys come together on that?
Yeah, there was, I'd say, a separation. It's happening to me, my physical body. Yes, it's happening to us as a couple, but it's different, right? Like if you break your leg, yes, it is happening to your partner as well, because they have to help you and different things like that. But you're the one that broke your leg, right. So it's kind of the same thing. And also there's so much dismissal of pregnancy loss that I think, unless you go through it, or someone close to you has gone through it, that like the general narrative is that, oh, it's so common. So, oh, well, just try again. Oh, it'll happen again. Or different things are said like, oh, well, at least you can get pregnant. Like things that just dismiss the emotional aspect of that. And so I think that contributed to a sense of not necessarily coming together over that.
Right. And I don't think the dismissive part is it. A lot of people dismiss the emotional side of it a lot of times. And I've seen that on both ends. I've definitely seen it on both ends where I guess it varies between person to person.
Sure.
Because I've met women who've had miscarriages and said exactly what you said, like, oh, I would just do it again. We failed the first 2 times, I'll just try it again. And so I think there's an emotional disconnect there. And then I've seen men on the other hand, on the other end go, man, she was this far along, and their roles change because they feel that they're neglected as well. Sure. I feel exactly what you're going. So the variation between them, but also the similarities as well. The men disassociate themselves as well as the women, but I didn't know women did that on the level of that. I've heard bits and pieces of it, but I didn't think that they really disassociated because when I think of women, I think of more community based. Mm-hmm. Not disassociation, because for the most part, I guess not for the most part. I guess it's becoming more and more common the further I go down this journey and learn from others like yourself. It is very, very common that men and women do pretty much the same things.
Yeah, I mean, there's differences and there's similarities, just like you said. And, my experience is one, and somebody else might have a different experience. But I've spoken to lots of women who have had similar experiences to me. And just speaking to other people who've had a similar experience and also a similar reaction to an experience, because we can react in different ways. It's just it's so helpful and so nourishing, building community like you're doing here with your podcast, letting people know that what they're feeling, what they're going through it's unique because it's them, but there are a lot of other people who can understand.
Right. And I think that's the important part of it is those communities out there. I feel that they need to be connected, not just in one general area, but just across the board, because there's 8 billion people on the earth. It's impossible to think that someone across the world is not experiencing the same thing, right? But I guess in that moment, I think you mentioned that before, in that moment, it is about you, right? It's because you are alone in that journey, your own mindset. And where it takes you in that mental journey, right? And looking at it from a different perspective, I can say the emotional part for me was there, but it wasn't. I disconnected from it. I just went, okay. And someone put it perfectly. They went your body that when it's trying to have a baby, it's like a computer chip. A broken computer chip, right? That's trying to come together. And just because you didn't have it, it just means that it's out of place. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But in your case, it didn't happen. And, wow. I don't know. It's that to me takes on a different train of thought. What happens when it doesn't happen? Where does your mindset go from there?
Yeah, well, I think there's a sort of narrative that we believe, or that we think that it is, you try to have a baby and you might have a few miscarriages. And so then you get help with, IVF or maybe some other kind of treatment. And then you have a baby. But there's so many people who don't have access to IVF, for one thing, for many different reasons. So that's just off the table for some people. And also going through some kind of assistance with pregnancy doesn't mean that you will have a baby. Lots of people go through IVF or different fertility treatments and don't have a baby at the end of it. but I don't think a lot of people realize that. And there's a statistic, it's in Canada, US, England, and Ireland. I think it's 1 in 5 women that end their childbearing years without a child.
Really?
So that can be for all kinds of reasons, some by choice, and some not by choice, but still a variety of reasons why. But 1 in 5 is a pretty large number of people, but we're kind of invisible. Like we kind of we're not really seen, and that adds also to this sense of disconnection.
Okay, and I can definitely see it from that perspective, because is it very common? I mean, is that why it's very dismissive, or people feel invisible when it happens? Is it such a common thing? I guess that's the question.
Miscarriage or ending your childbearing years without a child?
Both, actually.
Well, yeah, miscarriage is common, but just because something's common doesn't mean that it needs to be dismissed, right? Doesn't need, just my analogy, my example before, breaking your leg is common, but if you broke your leg, you wouldn't say to be like somebody like, oh, well, whatever, like you've got another leg, just hobble around on that one, you'll be fine. They would get some kind of care, In my case, having miscarriages and going to the doctor, and there's a few times I needed another procedure as well, I got care, like physical care for the immediate moment, but there was no emotional care. It was sort of just like, oh, well, it's common. So.
And see, that's where I was going with it. If it was just one of those things where people looked at it that way and just dismissed it, or maybe it was just something else that was going on. But now I'm starting to understand. Wow, how did that happen? Because when I was coming up, my mom never talked to me about miscarriages and things like that. My mom. She was just primarily who she was, My grandmother, we talked about it one time because one of my aunties miscarried. Mm-hmm. I think it was around 9 years old. And I overheard the conversation. And I remember seeing my aunt sit there crying, right? And I don't know, I guess it was just different. It wasn't dismissed. Everybody came together. The men knew to stay away from the women at that time. So, but the women came together and comforted her. They supported her, the family and people around in the neighborhood. So I guess for me, I thought that it was like that everywhere.
Well, that's great that your aunt had that support and the family awareness. That's really nice to hear. Yeah. And I think there are situations like that. I can't really make generalized statements like something is completely dismissed. I'm going on my own experience and the experience of other women that I've spoken to. And, in terms of how common is it that women end their childbearing years without a child? Well, 1 in 5, so that's pretty common.
That is very, very common. But now the process of going through that, the grieving, what were some of the things that you did grieve as you was going through that? Because I know, for most, and for like myself, even now, I still grieve a future that I was supposed to have, right? I still grieve the past because of those memories, the conversations, things like that. And I know in your perspective is just a little bit different, but I'm thinking there's some similarities there.
Yeah, there's huge similarities there. Yeah, there is the grief of the future that I didn't get to experience with a child. There's the grief of the loss of that relationship with my husband, in that I was able to, or we were able to have a child together. You know, there's the loss of all of the future hopes or ideas of what our life with a child of our own would have been like, as well as you say, the grief of getting to the point of being childless, you know, all of the experiences and the multiple losses throughout the time that we were trying.
Now, what are some of the techniques that you learned throughout the journey? Those, because everybody picks up those tools, right? And I think for the most part, everyone who does grief work, we develop those tools as we stumble into that storm, you know, and sometimes we get kicked out and have to run back in there again, you know, and figure out how to ride the wave out, you know. So what was that like for you, you know, going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, my yoga practice was big because it was a place that I had cultivated that was safe. You know, it was something that I knew, and sort of like in the space of my mat, I knew it was a place where I could go and be, and even going to a yoga studio that I worked at, so I knew people there. It was a super familiar place. That was really nourishing. Self-compassion meditation, I'd say, was and still is a really huge foundation for me. So, are you familiar with that type of meditation?
I was about to ask.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So it was developed by two doctors in the States, Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Chris Germer, and they run the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. And through their books and their information on their site, I sort of learned this technique and this idea of self-acceptance and self-compassion. So self-compassion isn't a practice of good feelings. So it's not like you have all of your, you know, myriad of feelings, you know, anger, despair, hopelessness, sadness, all those things. It's not trying to cover up those feelings with good, you know, quote unquote, good feelings. It's about creating a space a safe space where you can feel everything that you're feeling and feel kindness towards yourself that you're having those feelings.
Okay.
So it's a practice that can be done in groups or it can be done by yourself. And I had recorded myself leading self-compassion meditation, and I would listen to it. Yeah, and it's because with all of the feelings of grief, there's this sort of tension of, yes, you feel all these things, but you don't really want to feel them, and you kind of want them to be over. And you have to be going on with the rest of your life, whatever that looks like, at the same time as you're feeling all of these things. So having this practice that it sort of was like I could put a box around it. You know, this is the time and place that I get to feel all of these things, and it has a time limit on it. You know, it's not just endless. If I'm going to open something up and not be able to, you know, come out the other side for days, kind of thing. It's very contained, and I know that I can be with what's there and learn to accept what's there. You know, we might have this idea that sadness only lasts for an X number of whatever days, years, months, or that the 6 stages of grief are linear, and I was here and then now I'm back here, and then we can spin off into this, well, why aren't I further ahead, and I thought that I was getting better, quote unquote, and so the self-compassion practice has space for you to feel and be right where you're at, wherever it is, and offer yourself kindness. You actually repeat words of kindness to yourself, like the words that you need. And a technique that we use, if you can't find the words that you need, you imagine that you're having a conversation with a good friend in the same situation as you, and you discover what you would say, and then you offer those words of kindness to yourself.
Okay. That's very, very similar. And you're absolutely correct about grief. It has no rhyme or reason to it, and for me, I guess personally, it's been 5 years, right, since my son passed away. And so I'm going, I'm listening to you. I'm going, yeah, man, I can relate to that on so many levels, right? Because it still happens. And so people have this idea. And I also did too. I said, you know what? I'm going to give myself 3 years. I'm going to give myself 3 years, and I'm just going to be done with it, right? Because got to do the macho thing. I'm a guy. I gotta take control of this. And I can tell you the things that I've learned is very, very similar. The words of gratitude, having grace for yourself in that space, creating space for yourself. So you are allowed to do those things, and, listen to yours and how you got into it and all of these things that you discovered just across the board. Most people get there and don't know what to do. I know I didn't for a long time, because so many hit back to back, and it's like, I didn't even have the chance to grieve this, I'm trying to figure out what it was for the most part. We're like, what is this feeling, and now I understand that across the board, women just process it just a little bit different, but it's uncanny across the board. And that's what I want people to understand. If they get anything out of these videos, I want them to see the similarities across the board and realize that they're not by themselves, and that there is hope, because there's people, amazing people like yourself and a few other women that I've met that, I was just talking to someone last week about pregnancy loss, right? Amazing woman. You may know her. She's in Australia, Shauna. And so when she said that and listened to you, I'm going, man, do you guys know each other? Are you guys going back and forth? Because I feel like I've heard this, and I'm just going, wow, this is so amazing. And the journey of learning these things is not easy.
No.
It's definitely not easy, because like you said, we have this, our minds would tell us one thing. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is, it's nothing like that. Mm-hmm. Nothing like that at all. And for women, my heart goes out to you, because physically having to experience a miscarriage, I've experienced the emotional side of it, mm-hmm. Not the physical side of it. So I have a newfound respect for those women that can pick themselves up after going through something like that and say, man, I see you, I hear you. And I think that's really important, especially holding space. Mm-hmm. Now, it's that part of it, letting people know that they are validated in that space, as well as, what sort of yoga techniques kind of coincide with that to help them.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of yoga, and going to sort of your average yoga studio down the street in your town, you might not find what you're looking for. I'd say with any grief work in yoga, I'd look for somebody who specifically specializes in that.
Yes.
And within the world of yoga, there's so many options. There's the movement practice, which I described as earlier, has been key for me to reestablish the connection and the trust with my body. That yes, it didn't do what I had hoped it would do, but it does so many other things. And spending the time moving on the mat, again, it creates that safe container to sort of explore and reach out and build that trust. It's like any other relationship, that might have this, it might sound a bit funny, but because it's us, it's you, but relationship with your body is just that. It's a relationship, and so the physical practice, the movement practice of yoga, I found, and as well as spoken to lots of other women, childless women specifically, who have found the movement practice of yoga to have been integral in putting back the pieces of their life. In terms of anxiety or things like that, for me, breath work has been really foundational, grounding breath work. And again, there's lots of types of breath work. And if you're going to do breath work with somebody for grief, I would look specifically for that, because there's all kinds of breath work that for different reasons. So for me, working on techniques that slow down the exhale and that helps, it stimulates the relaxation response in your body, a longer exhale than an inhale. So you automatically get that sense of, slowing down, calming down. And if you practice it once, no, it's not really going to be beneficial. But these are all tools and techniques like in your toolbox that you can utilize again and again and again when the different situations arise. And something a little different that's not necessarily yoga related that I do a lot is writing. And so I found that the movement practice, connection with my body, the breathing practice for grounding, the self-compassion practice for sort of realizing and being with my feelings as they come. I felt like I needed a next thing, like not to move the feelings along to get them out, but just to sort of like release the charge of them, if you understand what I mean. And so I've used writing practice, free writing, to give those emotions and those feelings and that experience somewhere to go outside of my body, outside of my brain. And it has the effect of just sort of taking the pressure off a bit. And those are my biggies.
Wow. And I totally agree. One thing that I've actually learned too, and I learned from a EDMR, which is tapping, which has been very beneficial. Far as me finding that groundwork, right? Because I realized that if I find myself starting to be ridden with a little bit of anxiety, and I can recognize it right off the bat, I can find somewhere, and I can just focus that tapping there. And what I found out was that vibration was disrupting the sensation of the anxiety. And I was going, whoa, and it was like everything, not everything is going to work for everyone. I found what worked for me. So I always encourage people, find what works for you, but also having those tools in that box is very beneficial because everyone's different, right? And like, hey, maybe you should try this breath work. It has been awesome for me, right? Especially when I'm having, as you said, a griefy day. And they happen a lot more frequently around the holidays, around the birthdays and things like that, having those griefy days. And I've been a victim of being trapped into it and find myself 3 days later, isolated, couldn't tell you what happened. It's like my mind goes into the stage of, you know what, we're going to live in this moment right here. And it's never where I want to be. And The whole time I think I've gotten a lot accomplished and I haven't gotten nothing accomplished. And then I have to scramble to get all the messages off my phone because I've hid my phone from me as well. Also, physical activity. One thing that you said that is really, really interesting is the movement. And that has been phenomenal. Throwing on music, right? And there was something that I learned going through some studies about ancient traditions. So being someone who got into the work, that was one of the things I looked up because I had someone from Africa tell me that Americans didn't know how to grieve. And I went, what is behind that, right? And so what I found out was, and it's been a strong center point for everything across the board. Like we're not inventing the wheel, we just make improving it a little bit, right? It's the movement, the community, just the support all across the board, right? In the different areas. And I realized so many different communities out there. And an old friend of mine told me, find your tribe, right? And I don't know for myself, I didn't know what my tribe looked like, so I had to build one. So let's say find your tribe. I said I don't even know what my tribe looks like, and across the board, the hardest part was getting them to come together in that community, in that space, and go, "Wow, this person looks just like me." Was that something that because being a yoga instructor, you already had your community, right? You had the people that you worked with. And then having to add the grief work into it, did it kind of change your community a little bit?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've found a lot of community online. There is an incredible childless community online. So many Facebook groups, lots of people really active on Instagram. And so finding some places online, and then there's other folks who have like paid memberships and they hold events and have tons of information, book clubs, meetup groups, all kinds of things like that. So yeah, it really did take me going outside of my immediate community to find others who truly understand. Since then, and then now in the past few years, being way more vocal about my experience and offering, classes and courses to other childless women, people in my community from before, my, in real life community, are sort of coming to me saying, I didn't know you were going through that. I have this similar experience, and sort of opening up that way. But I didn't see my experience reflected in those around me. And that's not because it wasn't happening, but because there wasn't really a mechanism for like really talking about it or sharing about it. And so it kind of took me going off and meeting all of these people online and participating in different groups online to sort of find my voice in that, and then realizing like, hey, these things that I've been doing and that I'm listening to other childless women talk about their experience, and I felt like I had something to offer. And so then it was just last year, I guess, I started to, sort of check in with others, like, oh, is this something you'd like to do? Other childless women, would you like to do classes? Would you like to do meditations? And the response has been cautious, which I completely understand and I expected, but good, and slowly growing. There has to be a lot of trust.
Yes.
And I understand that, and I know that trust. So I'm building that trust.
That is beautiful. Now, when people join your group, what can they expect when they get there?
Yeah. So it depends on exactly sort of what they join. I offer single classes, just sort of one-offs, like, a movement. Like tomorrow night, I have a movement and a self-compassion meditation class. So for something like that, it's online. So they'd show up on Zoom and they have a choice to have their camera on or off. They don't have to be seen, and they can participate to the level that they want to participate. There's an opportunity to introduce yourself and say, what your name and where you're from, either verbally or people can write in the chat, but it's not required. And we go through the class. I lead the class. It's not recorded. And then at the end, there's an opportunity for questions, or if people want to offer some kind of reflection. And that again could be with their audio on, their camera on or off, or in the chat. And there's no expectation to participate in that way. And so then I also offer longer courses that are a combination of the movement, breath work, the self-compassion meditation, and the journaling. And that has more of a group coaching and a group discussion kind of element, but it's a closed container, with the same 10 people in it, meeting twice a week for 6 weeks. So that allows that trust to build. And that, again, I've had folks join and start, first couple of sessions, no camera on, and that by the end, they're feeling comfortable enough, camera on, interacting with others. But that's not a requirement. But it does fulfill that sort of community piece, that coming out of the shadows of invisibility, and that much needed sense of belonging.
Now, do you add music into any of your programs? Because I know for me, I do, because it kind of music is universal, right? And depending on what it is, it was something that I thought about when music is on. Depending on that music, people will move. So, and they do it subconsciously. Right. So a lot of times I put the music on in the groups, and the guys that come in here, and you'll see them start moving around, and we do everything virtually. So that movement aspect of it is really, really key to it, I guess, grief through the body. And I've had it trapped in my body for a very long time and never knew. Right. And, and I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware of the things that I was doing was setting me up for what I was going to do. I just knew to do it, right? And to dive into it and go, it is what it is. And, me and my buddy, we hate that statement, but it is what it is, right? Because I don't know, your body already knows. You mentioned something earlier about living, having the grief trapped here and not through the rest of the body. And a friend of mine, a long time ago, she's in the UK, she said, we grieve in 20% of our body. Mm-hmm. And so she connected the two between movement and having the body actually align itself. And thinking about yoga, I'm going, because I do yoga as well. I do yoga 5 times out of the week. And I realized the connection, the movement, right? Centering my body and actually being one right where I am in that moment. Mm-hmm. And everything. And I find that fascinating. I was like, wow, men, we don't yoga too much. We should. We should. But I think we have that interpretation of, what, if my body don't bend this way. And I still agree. I'm still hurting from the last bending exercise. I'm not as flexible as I used to be. So tell people about your company.
Yeah, so it's called Embodied Possibility. And so the whole idea with the different practices, it's not about doing the practices just to do them. It's about through the practices, opening up this space to the possibility of what your life might hold, even though it doesn't look like you wanted it to, even though it doesn't look like you had planned it to. So everything that I do is centered around that.
And where can people find you?
Yeah, at embodiedpossibility.com is my website. And on Instagram also at embodiedpossibility. Well, on my website, there's a ton of downloadable free practices. So there's a meditation, there's a movement practice, there's a journaling practice. So you can go there and sort of get a taste of what I offer, my style, my approach. That's a really great way to also stay in touch with me.
Nice. Now, if you had any encouraging words for a woman experiencing something similar to you, what would you tell them?
That it's going to be okay. That there are lots of other women who understand, and that meeting up with them, whether it be online or in person through some kind of group, will be a really important gateway to taking those next few steps.
Very, very nice. Well, I want to say, Sarah, thank you. Sarahjane.
Thank you.
And for everyone who's looking at her name, that is her first name, Sarahjane. So, and I made that mistake as well, but I've had a wonderful, wonderful time talking with you today and learned so much. And I hope the people watching this today have learned so much. And I hope the women that are watching it reach out. Right. Because I didn't know that there was that many resources out there for women. And because I don't deal with women. I deal with primarily men. Right. And I know the resources out there are very limited. But I didn't know that there was that many. And I want people to know that you're out there. I want people to reach out to you. So if you are a woman struggling and maybe you haven't found a conventional way of doing things, try yoga. Try with Sarahjane, because man, I'm not a woman. I want to go try with her too. But with that being said, I had a blast, Sarah. I really did. I want to say thank you for being on the show and for your time today. And for everyone listening, I will have her links put down below. So reach out to her and get into some of her virtual groups and go see what it's all about, because I'm intrigued as well. So I'm going to be sending people your way. Until next time, everyone, have a safe holidays. Keep your head up. And for those women out there struggling, please reach out. Community and support are number one in your healing. So please, it's not an isolated event. Reach out to the people that have been there and walked that path. You won't regret it. So until next time, you guys enjoy your day.